On a ranch, the rural routine was marked by hard work. There was a young, rough cowboy, shaped by the absence of his parents. One day, the ranch owner's daughter unexpectedly appears. When their cold gazes meet, their lives were about to change. Before hearing this exciting story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The sun had not yet risen on the horizon when Ethan Thompson was already up, gazing at the vastness of Hope Valley Ranch through the simple window of his wooden house. At 25, his youthful face bore early marks of a life dedicated to cattle and the land. His brown eyes, inherited from the mother he barely knew, reflected a mix of strength and melancholy that only those who grew up under the sternness of old Benjamin Thompson, his grandfather, could understand. The ranch was beginning to wake, up as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in orange hues. The birdsong blended with the distant lowing of cattle, creating a familiar symphony that had accompanied his mornings since childhood. Ethan put on his faded plaid shirt, adjusted his time-worn hat, and headed out for another day of work. In the main corral, the other ranch hands were already preparing for the daily tasks. Among them was Liam Johnson, his closest friend and confidant during their rare moments of rest. "The boss is coming," Liam warned, adjusting his horse's saddle. "And he's not alone." William Carter, the owner of Hope Valley Ranch, was a man of imposing presence despite his 60 years. That morning, he arrived in his luxurious pickup truck, kicking up dust on the dirt road that cut through the property. Beside him, a young woman with a city-like appearance stepped out of the vehicle with visible discomfort, her expensive shoes immediately stained by the red dirt. "Olivia, welcome to Hope Valley Ranch," said William with a smile that couldn't hide a certain weariness. "This will be your home for the next 3 months." The young woman, who couldn't have been more than 22, looked around with an expression that mixed disdain and resignation. Her long, perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup, and designer clothes stood in stark contrast to the rural setting. "Dad, you can't be serious," she protested, adjusting her branded sunglasses. 3 months here, I'll go crazy." Ethan discreetly observed the scene, continuing his work of checking the nearby fences. Something about the girl's arrogant demeanor deeply bothered him, reminding him of the reasons he preferred the company of animals to that of humans. "Olivia, we've already talked about this," William replied firmly. "You need to learn the value of work and responsibility. Your extravagances in the city have gone too far. Here you'll learn the true meaning of earning your own keep." The discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Sophia Martinez, the ranch's manager. At 35, Sophia was known for her efficiency and dedication to her work. Her green eyes sparkled, peculiarly as they landed on Ethan, who pretended not to notice. "Mr. William, I'm glad you're here," said Sophia, approaching with her ever-present clipboard. "We have some important matters to discuss regarding the new cattle shipment. Sophia, please show my daughter to her accommodations," William requested. "And Olivia, I want you ready to start work early tomorrow morning." Without discussion, Olivia huffed, dragging her designer suitcase through the dirt with difficulty. Sophia approached to help her but was met with a sharp look from the young woman. "I can very well carry my own things, thank you." Ethan couldn't help but smirk at the scene. The big city really had the power to turn people into creatures completely out of touch with reality. His thoughts were interrupted by the deep voice of his grandfather, who was approaching on his spotted horse. "Boy, stop standing there watching the commotion and go check on the cattle in the north pasture," ordered Benjamin, his voice carrying its usual authority. "Work waits for no one." As he mounted his horse, Ethan could still hear Olivia's protests echoing across the ranch yard. Something told him that the arrival of that young woman would change the quiet routine of Hope Valley Ranch, and not necessarily for the better. The day went on as usual, but there was something different in the air. The ranch hands whispered among themselves about the arrival of the city princess, as they had already nicknamed Olivia. Liam, always bolder in his comments, didn't miss the chance to tease his friend during lunch in the barn. "So Ethan, what do you think of our new co-worker?" he asked with a mischievous grin. "I bet she won't last a week here." Ethan maintained his usual silence, but couldn't help thinking about the irony of the situation. He who had grown up knowing every inch of that land, every secret of handling the animals, would now have to coexist with someone who had probably never set foot on dirt in her life. By late afternoon, As the sun prepared to set, Ethan watched. From a distance as Olivia sat on the porch of the main house, absorbed in her phone. For a brief moment their eyes met, and he noticed something beyond her initial arrogance, perhaps a flicker of fear or insecurity. Sophia suddenly appeared by his side, interrupting his thoughts. "Tomorrow I want you supervising her work," she said, in a tone that brooked no argument. "Show her how things work around here." "Why me?" Ethan asked, furrowing his brow. "Because you're the best ranch hand we have," Sophia replied, her tone softening slightly. "And also the most patient. You're going to need a lot of patience with her." As he rode back to his house at the end of the day, Ethan reflected on the changes that this unexpected arrival might bring. The gentle night breeze carried the scent of damp earth, and the stars began to dot the dark sky. Somehow he knew that his life at Hope Valley Ranch would never be the same after Olivia's arrival. Dawn arrived with the promise of a particularly hot day at Hope Valley Ranch. Olivia tossed and turned in her bed, trying to ignore the shrill crowing of the roosters announcing the morning. Her room in the main house, though comfortable, was far from the luxury of her apartment in the city. The wooden walls and rustic decor seemed to mock her current situation. When she finally decided to get up, it was already past 7 in the morning. She dressed in what she considered appropriate workwear for the countryside, designer jeans and a white t-shirt that cost the equivalent of a ranch hand's monthly salary. He completed the look with a pair of boots he had never worn before, bought in a rush before his forced trip. In the kitchen, Margaret Brown, the cook who had worked for the family for decades, was already preparing breakfast. The aroma of fresh coffee and homemade bread filled the air, but Olivia barely touched the food, accustomed to her strict diets and detox juices. "Girl, you need to eat properly to handle the work," advised Margaret, with the wisdom of her 70 years. "It's not like the city here." Olivia was about to respond when Ethan appeared at the kitchen door. His tall, commanding presence and serious expression caused a strange unease in her. "You're late," he said bluntly. "Work starts at sunrise." "No one told me about the schedule," Olivia retorted, standing up in irritation. "And who are you to give me orders?" "I'm the person assigned to teach you the work on the ranch," he replied calmly. "And your first lesson is about punctuality." Reluctantly, Olivia followed Ethan to the barn. The sun was already high and the heat was beginning to intensify. Her perfectly brushed hair soon began to stick to her neck, and she bitterly regretted not bringing a hair tie to keep it up. "First task of the day, clean the barn," Ethan announced, handing her a shovel. "You must be joking," Olivia protested, looking in horror at the tool in her hands. "I didn't come here to be treated like some servant." Ethan stared at her with a mix of irritation and amusement. "Here, everyone works. There's no such thing as lesser or greater work, only necessary work. If you want meat on your plate, someone has to take care of the cattle. If you want a clean place for the animals, someone has to clean." His words, though harsh, carried a truth Olivia had never considered. Still, her stubbornness spoke louder. "My father will hear about this." "Your father approved your activity schedule," Ethan replied, impassively. "Now if you prefer to stand around complaining, the sun will only get hotter." Reluctantly, Olivia began to work. Her movements were clumsy, and soon her delicate hands began to form blisters. Sweat dripped down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. Liam Johnson, who was working nearby, watched the scene with an amused smile. "So hey, princess, be careful not to break a nail," he teased, receiving a disapproving look from Ethan. The hours dragged on, and Olivia felt every muscle in her body protest. Never in her life had she done such intense physical labor. Her Pilates and gym sessions at the most exclusive club in the city seemed like child's play compared to this. During lunch, served in the barn alongside the other workers, Olivia could barely hold her utensils. Sitting in an isolated corner, she observed with a mix of fascination and disgust the simplicity of the meal: rice, beans, meat, and vegetables from the ranch's garden. Sophia appeared to oversee the progress of the work, her eyes always attentive to every detail. "How is our new employee doing?" she asked Ethan in a tone Olivia couldn't quite decipher. "Surviving," he replied dryly. In the afternoon, Ethan decided to change Olivia's routine. He took her to the stable where a gentle mare awaited. "You need to learn how to ride," he declared. You can't work on a ranch without knowing how to handle horses. I already know how to ride, Olivia replied proudly. I took lessons at the club since I was little. Ethan raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Riding in an arena isn't the same as riding in the field. Here the horse is your work companion, not a leisure accessory. The riding lesson proved to be even more challenging than cleaning the barn. The Western saddle was different from what Olivia was used to, and the commands needed to be firmer and more precise. To her surprise, Ethan turned out to be a patient teacher, explaining every detail clearly. Keep your back straight, he instructed. The horse senses your insecurity. Trust him and he'll trust you. By the end of the day, as the sun set on the horizon, Olivia was exhausted, dirty and sore. Her expensive clothes were ruined, and her pride was as bruised as her hands. Tomorrow we start earlier, Ethan warned before saying goodbye. And where? Something more appropriate. This isn't the place for designer labels. Back in her room, Olivia collapsed onto the bed without even taking a shower. Her hands trembled as she typed a message to her city friends, recounting her day in hell. Yet something strange was happening. Mixed with the exhaustion and indignation, there was a small sense of accomplishment she couldn't quite explain. Outside, Ethan was talking to his grandfather on the porch of their simple home. "How was the first day with the city girl?" asked old Benjamin, lighting his pipe. "It's going to be harder than I imagined," Ethan replied, watching the first stars appear in the sky. "But something tells me there's more to her than meets the eye." Benjamin exhaled a puff of smoke, an enigmatic smile on his wrinkled lips. "The best transformations start with the greatest resistance, my grandson. Give it time." Olivia's first week at the ranch passed like a whirlwind of discoveries and challenges. Every muscle in her body protested against the heavy labor, but, surprisingly, she was beginning to develop a routine. She woke up before sunrise, not by choice, but because the noise of the animals and the movement of the workers made it impossible to keep sleeping. On that particular morning, something different happened. As she headed to the barn, Olivia found Ethan feeding a newborn calf with a bottle. The scene caught her off guard. There was a softness in his gaze that she had never noticed before. "I want to give it a try," he asked, noticing her presence. Olivia hesitated. Her nails, once perfectly manicured, were now short and polish-free, adapted to her new reality. "I don't know if—" "Come here," he called, with an unusual gentleness in his voice. "It's not hard." Approaching cautiously, Olivia took the bottle from Ethan's hands. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending a strange electric current through her body. The calf, eager, began to suckle the milk vigorously. "Why is he being fed like this?" she asked, genuinely curious. "His mother had complications during birth," Ethan explained. "She's too weak to nurse him. Here at the ranch, we don't abandon anyone." Something in the way he said those last words caught Olivia's attention. There was a story there, hidden between the unspoken words. The day continued with the usual tasks, but Olivia began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed. Like the way Liam always arrived early to feed the horses, humming old songs. Or how Margaret would set aside an extra piece of cake for Benjamin, Ethan's grandfather, even when he didn't ask for it. During lunch, Sophia appeared in the barn with news. "We're having a party at the ranch next weekend," she announced. "It's a tradition to celebrate the start of the harvest." Olivia's eyes lit up at the mention of a party, even if it was something completely different from the nightlife she was used to in the city. "What kind of party?" she asked, trying not to show too much interest. "A typical one," Sophia replied, giving Ethan a meaningful look. "With music, food and dancing, everyone participates." "Everyone," Liam emphasized, laughing. "Even Ethan, who only dances after a lot of convincing." Olivia couldn't help but smile at the thought of the serious Ethan dancing. There was so much she didn't know about these people who were gradually becoming part of her life. In the afternoon, while helping in the garden, a task she had surprisingly learned to appreciate, Olivia observed a scene that intrigued her. Benjamin, Ethan's grandfather, was sitting alone on the porch of his modest home, staring intently at an old photograph. Driven by a curiosity she couldn't contain, Olivia approached him quietly. The old man noticed her presence but didn't move. "They're his parents," Benjamin said without taking his eyes off the photo. "Emily and Antonio." Olivia felt the weight of those words. It was the first time anyone had mentioned Ethan's parents. "What happened to them?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Benjamin sighed deeply. "A car accident on the road when he was just 5 years old. They were coming back from a party in the neighboring town. Since then, it's just been the two of us." Olivia felt her heart tighten. Suddenly, Ethan's toughness, his dedication to work, it all started to make more sense. "That's why he's so—" she began, but couldn't finish. "Closed off?" Benjamin completed. "Yes. Losing his parents so young changed him. He learned to protect himself, keeping everyone at a safe distance." The sun was beginning to set when Olivia finally returned to her tasks, her mind filled with new thoughts. She found Ethan in the stable, brushing a horse with methodical and precise movements. "You ride much better now," he commented without looking at her. "You've learned quickly." "I had a good teacher," Olivia replied, surprising herself with the sincerity in her voice. For a moment, the silence between them seemed heavy with unspoken words. Olivia wanted to say that she understood him a little better now, that she was sorry for his loss, but something held her back. Perhaps it was the fear of breaking the fragile balance that was beginning to form between them. Sophia appeared suddenly, interrupting the moment. "Olivia, your father wants to speak with you in the main house," she informed her, her professional tone masking a hint of irritation that didn't go unnoticed. As she walked away, Olivia glanced back one last time. Ethan had turned his attention back to the horse, but something about his posture seemed different, more vulnerable perhaps. That night, lying in her bed, Olivia reflected on how her perception of the ranch and its inhabitants had changed in just 1 week. What had once seemed like an unfair punishment was beginning to reveal itself as a journey of discovery, not just about rural work, but about the people, their stories, and, most importantly, about herself. Outside, the chirping of crickets and the occasional lowing of cattle created a nighttime symphony that, surprisingly, she no longer found irritating. On the contrary, there was something comforting about that natural melody, so different from the honks and sirens of the city. In his simple home, Ethan also remained awake, his thoughts drifting to the city girl who was slowly beginning to reveal a side of herself he hadn't expected to discover. The photo of his parents, always present on his nightstand, seemed to watch him with a new meaning that night. The preparations for the harvest festival were bustling throughout Hope Valley Ranch. The main courtyard was being decorated with colorful banners, and the aroma of traditional dishes that Margaret Brown and her helpers were preparing filled every corner of the property. Olivia, to her own surprise, found herself genuinely excited about the event. "You need an appropriate outfit," said Margaret as she prepared her famous corn cakes. "The harvest festival isn't the place for designer dresses, girl." Olivia looked at her suitcases, filled with clothes unsuitable for the occasion. After 2 weeks on the ranch, she had already learned that her idea of casual was completely different from rural reality. "And where am I supposed to find an appropriate outfit around here?" "Leave it to me," replied the cook with a knowing smile. "My niece Anna is about your size. She always keeps some nice pieces for special occasions." Meanwhile, in the fields, Ethan was coordinating the final tasks before the festival. The harvest had been especially good that year, and even his usually serious expression showed satisfaction. Liam, working beside him, didn't miss the chance to tease him. "So are you going to muster the courage to ask the princess to dance tomorrow?" he asked with a mischievous grin. Ethan pretended not to hear, focusing on adjusting the fence of the new pasture, but his thoughts betrayed him, leading him to imagine Olivia in traditional attire, her hair loose in the wind during the dance. Sophia supervised everything with her usual perfectionism, but something about her behavior was different. Her glances at Ethan grew more intense, and her irritation with Olivia became more evident. "We need to check the drink stock for tomorrow," she said, approaching Ethan. "Can you help me after work?" "I can help too," offered Olivia, who was passing by carrying bales of straw for the decorations. Her once delicate hands now bore calluses like medals of her adaptation to rural life. Sophia shot her an icy look. "That won't be necessary. You probably have other priorities." The sharp tone didn't go unnoticed by anyone. Olivia, who in the first weeks would have responded in kind, simply shrugged and continued her work. Her transformation was notable not just physically, but especially in her behavior. In the afternoon, while helping set up the tables for the festival, Olivia was surprised by the arrival of her father. William observed his daughter for a few moments, noticing the subtle changes in her posture, in the way she moved more confidently through the rural environment. "Ah, you've changed," he commented with a mix of pride and surprise. "It's the hard work," she replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "It does wonders for your posture." William smiled, recognizing in his daughter's words a humor he hadn't seen in a long time. "And what do you think of the experience so far?" Olivia paused for a moment, considering the question. "It's different from what I imagined," she finally replied. "The people here have their own way of seeing life. At first I thought it was all very simple, even primitive, but there's a wisdom in that simplicity that I've never found in the city." Her father nodded, satisfied. "And Ethan? How has it been working with him?" The mention of the ranch hand's name made Olivia blush slightly, something that didn't go unnoticed by William. "He's a good teacher," she replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Demanding but patient." Across the yard, Benjamin watched the interaction between father and daughter with interest. The old man had lived long enough to recognize the subtle signs of a transformation in progress. That night after dinner, Olivia found a package on her bed. Inside was a traditional festival dress with lace details and colorful ribbons. A note from Margaret Brown accompanied the outfit. "For you to shine tomorrow, dear." Touched by the gesture, Olivia tried on the dress. The mirror revealed a very different image from the socialite who had arrived at the ranch weeks ago. Her face, slightly tanned from working outdoors, had a natural glow that no expensive makeup could ever achieve. On the porch of the main house, Sophia was organizing the day's final spreadsheets when she saw Ethan pass by on his horse. Her heart raced, as it always did in his presence. "Are you going to the festival tomorrow?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "It's like every year," he replied without much enthusiasm. "Maybe we could dance a song," she suggested, her voice filled with hope. Ethan merely nodded vaguely before continuing on his way, leaving Sophia with her thoughts and a growing sense of unease. As the night deepened, the ranch gradually quieted except for the sounds of nature. Olivia, still wearing Margaret's gift, walked to the window of her room. The full moon illuminated the yard where, the next day, the festival would take place. In his simple home, Ethan also gazed at the night, an old photograph in his hands. In it, his parents smiled at a harvest festival many years ago. His father wore a plaid shirt, and his mother a dress very similar to the one Anna had lent to Olivia. Fate sometimes had a peculiar sense of humor, he thought, putting the photo back in his drawer. Tomorrow would be a special day, and something in the air suggested that more than just a simple harvest festival was about to happen at Hope Valley Ranch. The day of the festival dawned with a different energy at Hope Valley Ranch. The sky was exceptionally blue, and a gentle breeze carried the aroma of the treats that had been bubbling in Margaret's pots since dawn. Olivia woke up earlier than usual, her heart pounding with an anticipation she couldn't explain. The borrowed dress was carefully laid out over a chair, its colorful ribbons dancing in the breeze that drifted through the window. Even though she had a few tasks to complete before the party, Olivia found herself repeatedly glancing at the dress, imagining what the celebration would be like. "Today the work is lighter," Liam explained during breakfast. "It's tradition. We only do the essentials so everyone can prepare for the party." The flow of visitors was already beginning to pick up. Wagons and trucks arrived carrying families from neighboring ranches, all bringing some contribution to the party. Homemade sweets, traditional treats, artisanal drinks. The hospitality of the countryside was on display in its purest form. Sophia coordinated the preparations with her usual efficiency, but there was a noticeable tension in her movements. Her eyes followed Ethan whenever he passed by, carrying bales of hay or helping set up the final structures for the party. "Olivia, I need you to help with the table decorations," Sophia ordered, her tone sharper than necessary. "And try not to ruin anything." "Leave it to me," Olivia replied, surprising everyone with her calmness. The old Olivia would have snapped, "Back? But weeks of hard work had taught her more than just rural tasks. They had given her a new perspective on humility and respect. By the afternoon, as the sun began its descent on the horizon, the transformation of the yard was complete. Colorful streamers danced in the wind, long tables covered with embroidered tablecloths awaited the guests, and a small stage had been set up for the local musicians. Olivia retreated to get ready, her heart beating faster with each passing minute. For the first time in a long while, she didn't miss her expensive makeup or imported beauty products. She opted for a simple look, leaving her hair loose and natural, with just a wildflower tucked behind her ear. When she finally put on the borrowed dress, the image in the mirror surprised her. The dress, with its simple ruffles and colorful ribbons, seemed to have been made for her. Her beauty now had something authentic about it, something no sophisticated production had ever captured before. Outside, the music had already started. The sound of the accordion blended with the guitar and percussion, creating a joyful and contagious melody. The first couples began to dance, twirling around the yard illuminated by colorful lanterns. Ethan, wearing a crisp shirt and neatly pressed pants, leaned against one of the barn posts watching the scene. His gaze wandered over the crowd, seemingly disinterested, but his heart skipped a beat when Olivia appeared on the porch of the main house. "Our princess looks different today," Liam commented, approaching with 2 cups of spiced cider. "She almost looks like a true country girl." Before Ethan could respond, Sophia appeared, wearing a red dress that had clearly been chosen to draw attention. "How about a dance?" she asked Ethan directly, ignoring Liam's presence. The moment was interrupted by Benjamin, who approached leaning on his cane. "My grandson," he said with a special gleam in his eye, "your mother loved this song." "Why? Don't you ask the young lady to dance?" Everyone knew he wasn't referring to Sophia. Ethan hesitated for a moment, his eyes meeting Olivia's as she stepped into the yard. There was something magnetic about that instant, as if the entire party had fallen silent around them. Sophia noticed the exchanged glances, and her face hardened. "I'll check if everything is in order in the kitchen," she said curtly, walking away with stiff steps. Olivia, on the other hand, felt strangely nervous. The lights, the music, the festive atmosphere, everything seemed more intense. Some people greeted her, noticing her transformation, but her eyes kept returning to Ethan's figure. The night was just beginning, and the air carried that special electricity that precedes important moments. The stars shone brightly in the country sky, as if they too wanted to join the celebration. Margaret, observing everything from her privileged spot near the food tables, smiled contentedly. Her hands, calloused from years of work, adjusted the flower arrangement on the embroidered tablecloth, while her wise eyes followed the unfolding events. "Ah, my dear," she murmured to herself, "when love decides to show up, no fence can hold it back." The Harvest Festival was officially beginning, and with it perhaps a new chapter in the history of Hope Valley Ranch. The music shifted to a slower rhythm, an old country tune that spoke of rural love. Olivia watched the couples dancing, feeling